So BVSSH meetup, and we're going to be talking about measuring performance and its impact on outcomes for the organization. So I'm Peter Madison, and we'll do a quick introduction. I'm a coach and a consultant. I work in the space of helping organizations adopt new ways of working. So there we go. So we're going to start this off, but with the comment around like we shouldn't be measuring anything unless we know how to respond to a metric, and this especially is of importance when we look at why are we measuring things? Where are we measuring the right things? Are we looking at how that impacts the organization? Are we measuring just for the sake of measuring, and then really are we considering what that's going to do when we get the thing that we've measured? So I'm going to run through a quick analysis, like, so why do we measure things? Why do we feel like we have this need to measure? And there's different levels of measurement that we go through. There's this idea we have that, like, what happened to us? These are the descriptive analytics, the most basic form of reporting that any organization can implement. It's like, what happened in the past? We then look at, like, why did it happen? So we look at diagnostics. We look to understand why is it that this thing that has occurred, did it happen? So what can we do with that? Then we look at, well, what will happen? Once we've been able to build up this understanding of what has happened and why it happened, we can start to look at, like, what will happen. We can try and be predictive about it. And then if we can get really, really good, how can we make that thing that we're predicting actually happen? How can we start to look at metrics which allow us to be more prescriptive in nature? How can we say, okay, what can we use this data for? How can we actually trigger the event that we want to see happen? So to do this, what is it we want to measure? Well, we got ideas, and we go through a bunch of process, and we produce some kind of outcome at the end of it. And so we can measure the process of ideation, the process of generating, and the process of delivery. We can measure what are those outcomes. Like, did we get the outcomes we were expecting? Have we got the things that we want? But we have a tendency as well to try and measure the performance of the people who did this, the individuals within the system. And this is generally a really, really bad idea. So we really shouldn't be looking at measuring individual performance in the delivery of our outcomes, because it generates all sorts of problems. And Deming said this very well. This idea of a merit rating is very alluring. This idea that we can capture and look at if we pay for what we get and we get what we pay for, this will motivate people to do their best for their own good. But the actual reality is that most often we'll get the exact opposite of what these words promise. When we start to rate people, when we start to say, okay, you are a 10 and you are a 3 and you're a 5, it doesn't actually have the effect that we're looking for. It more often will start to demoralize people. It creates disorganization. So it's what can we do instead? Another way of looking at this too is that, and I quite like this comic around the idea that if Conway's law is true and HR drives the structuring of the organization, then it's HR who's actually designing our software. And that is a fairly terrifying idea in of itself. We shouldn't be looking at how do we structure things, how do we make things in this manner. So what can we measure? What sort of examples of things that people do measure? So this is one of the things that we often see, is that when we go into organizations, we find that they decide, well, if we can't measure individual performance, so instead we're going to measure things like velocity, lines of code, and escape defects. And I'm sure we've all seen these things get measured in organizations, and what a great idea that is too. So why would we measure velocity? Well, it's like how much gets done, right? Like the velocity is the amount of things that we've managed to get done. Lines of code is like how hard are our programmers working? And escape defects is all about like, well, what is the quality of the outcome that we're producing? And there are a number of pitfalls that we start to run into when we're looking at metrics in this manner. There's this idea of perverse incentives where we're actually getting the opposite effect of the one that we're looking to achieve. You've got the Hawthorne effect, which is around that which gets measured will improve. This comes from, I believe it comes from a factory, although I found some other reasons, but it was this idea that it was actually a factory called Hawthorne, and they measured to do with lighting, like what the improvement of the people was. When they turned the lighting on, they found that the productivity improved, but the two things were what was actually improving was the fact that the people who were being measured knew their productivity was being measured, and so their productivity improved, not because of any of the other external effects that were being changed. You get what you measure. And when you measure, Goodhart's law, when what a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Like we shouldn't be looking for we shouldn't be looking to put measures into place and making that the compliance to that measure the thing that we're doing. So I'm sure that you've all encountered metrics which get used as targets and essentially become weapons at that point, as they're used to beat people into submission. And then we look at this in the perspective of the three metrics we were describing earlier, like velocity, how much get done. It's like, well, there's lots of ways in which this can be gamed. It's like we can inflate story points, we can include defects as part of the velocity, we can count partial work finished, we can look at lines of code. Is this really how hard programs work? I mean, lots of white space, lots of ways of creating extra lines of code. We can not bother to refactor our code. We can make it really, really terrible. And we can have escape defects. What is a quality? Only log defects found by testers, and classify defects as scope creep, this kind of thing, which is really destroys these as anything that could possibly be described as a good metric to measure the performance of your teams. So I'd recommend when you're looking at what metrics you're looking at in your teams, really consider, like, how will these be gamed? What will happen if I consider this in, what happens when I get more of this? Because when I start to measure this, I'm going to get more of it. What's the impact going to be to my organization as a result of this? Because it may very well have an effect of making the situation worse rather than better. Oops. Okay, so here's an alternative vote. So when we talk about how do we improve, how do we look at a place to start, because there's lots and lots of metrics out there, lots of ways we can approach this. So what would an alternative approach be? So let's start with this idea that we want to have a minimal impact on the work that we're doing when we're measuring for metrics. We want something that we know can be trusted, and we want it to be able to provide insight towards a decision. We want it to be something that we're using to help understand and make decisions. And we want to be able to measure outcomes, not compliance to the metric. One model that we use for this is something called GQM. GQM is goal question metric. And we first of all, we look at what is the goal we're looking for. We then look at what is the question that we're looking to answer. And then we design a metric that will help us achieve that goal and answer that question. So to give you an example, we say, okay, we have a goal that we want to be able to deliver our software on time. We have a question of, like, how much work can the team get done? Like, how many features can the team complete? And so we might create a metric like throughput and use this to measure for this. Throughput being the amount of something that goes through something. So we measure a single data point to get through point. This is really easy. This is the easiest thing in the world you can measure. I just got to capture this single data point. And then we can say, we're done. I've started measuring. I've got a measurement, and it's a good measurement, and I'm happy with it. I know what we're doing. So I was done on the 6th of November, 2020. Obviously, the last time I gave this talk. So then we can take this and we graph this over time, and we can look at what is the impact over time of throughput. We can look at, like, what's happening. We can create trend lines. We can learn an awful lot of information about how work is flowing through our system simply by measuring this single data point. And if I add a bit more data, like, hey, maybe I'm going to classify the types of things that we're doing, and I'm going to say, okay, this thing that I finished was a bug. We fixed a bug versus completing a story. And now I can start to get even more information about, okay, if I look at my throughput, I can look at my moving average of my throughput, and I can start to see how many bugs I finished within that time frame. Now I've started to get some more information about my organization. I can also create the moving average simply of the stories. How much value am I delivering? And if I start to compare these two, I can see where I'm getting more bugs. I'm fairly consistent, in fact, in my story delivery on average. And if I look here, I can see at this point, this is where bugs start to go up. I seem to be getting a lot more bugs in this area. So I've got an area here where I can start to investigate and look at, like, so why is that? What happened at this point in time? Why is it that I suddenly start to get more bugs? And remember, all I've done here is track a single data point, just when did the work item get finished? And there's a throughput calculator that you're happy to download here, and it gives you the spreadsheet that you can just put the information in, and it'll calculate and create those pretty graphs for you. So what's next? What could I do in addition to this? Well, let's ask a question as a goal, as like, make the promises that we can keep, and say, okay, how long does it take for my team to complete a feature? And for that, we can measure cycle time. And here again, I really just need an additional data point in addition to my endpoint, is like, when did we start? And for that, I can look at, we're done. And now I've got an idea of my cycle time. Now I can look at it from this perspective of having an understanding of, like, what is the end-to-end time it takes me to complete a work item. And there's a demo as well, but I'm going to do that here. And here, just for Brian, there's the DORA metrics. So, because this is setting up a set of standards for like metrics that we can look to track. I would also look to track things like flow efficiency if I'm looking across my end-to-end system as well. And this can start to give us a lot more information about our software delivery practices as well. And remember, only measure what you're willing to act on. Measure outcomes and ensure your processes produce outcomes regularly. And remember that you will get what you measure, so understand what happens if you get more of the things that you are measuring. And with that, there's a quick feedback form, because we always put these at the end of our presentation with some pretty flowers. And that is a little presentation on metrics to get us inspired and thinking about metrics before we go into our lean coffee.